Hello and welcome to a new episode of Nile TV Newsroom Live. I'm Raham Morsi and today we have a number of different segments as usual. First, we start off with the world of politics, then a closer look at what's happening in the world of business and finance. Sometimes we have some stories that are interesting when it comes to the world of technology and the arts. Finally, we end the show with a closer look at the sports world. So stay tuned for more on this show after the break. Starting off with politics, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi gave directions to offer humanitarian assistance to Libya and Morocco, both suffering from the repercussions of a natural disaster over the past few days. He was speaking during a meeting with army commanders. He gave directions to the military to forces to immediately send supplies to the two countries by all means. He ordered emergency staff and equipment to be sent to both countries, as well as to coordinate with the Libyan and Moroccan institutions to establish camps for the survivors. He expressed full solidarity with the two countries and offered his condolences to the victims of the disasters. Presidential spokesman Councillor Ahmed Fahmy said Egypt had announced 3 days of mourning in solidarity with the brotherly nations. The president offered his condolences to Libya after the storm Daniel hit, killing hundreds as well as destroying the northern part of the country. Cairo also expressed grief for the incident that took place in Morocco, where a 6.7 magnitude quake hit the country, wiping entire villages out. Many survivors of Morocco's earthquake were struggling in makeshift shelters on Tuesday after a fourth night outside, while villagers in devastated mountain areas voiced frustration at having received no help from authorities. Here's the sport.
The death toll from the 6.8 magnitude quake that struck in the High Atlas Mountains late Friday night stood at 2,862 people, with over 2,560 people reported injured. This is Morocco's deadliest earthquake since 1960 and its most powerful one in the century. Rescuers from Spain, Britain and Qatar were helping Morocco's search teams, whilst Italy, Belgium, France and Germany said their offers of assistance had yet to be approved. The situation was most desperate for people in remote areas cut off by landslides triggered by the earthquake that blocked access to roads, whilst in accessible locations relief efforts were stepping up with tent camps and distribution of food and water. Hopes of finding survivors were fading, not least because many traditional mud brick houses that are common in the High Atlas crumbled to earthen rubble without leaving air pockets. Many villages have had no power or telephone network since the earthquake struck and have had to rescue loved ones and pull out dead bodies buried from under their crushed homes without any assistance. The epicenter of the quake is about 72 kilometers southwest of Marrakesh, where some historical buildings in the old city, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, were damaged. More modern parts of Marrakesh largely escaped unscathed. Morocco has accepted offers of aid from Spain, Britain, the UAE and Qatar, but is still to take up offers of help from Italy, Belgium, France and Germany.
Algeria has allocated 3 aircrafts to transport a rescue team of 93 personnel as well as humanitarian aid to Morocco after the devastating earthquake that hit the country, awaiting the green light from the kingdom. Morocco has accepted offers of aid from Spain and Britain, which both sent search and rescue operations with sniffer dogs, and from the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. Joining us over the phone to tell us more about this is Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good evening to you, Mr. Ambassador. Sir? Mr. Ambassador, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. As you know, sir, Morocco last Friday suffered a tremendous tragedy with the quake hitting the country and many villages completely wiped out. Many countries offered assistance in the wake of this disaster. Why has Morocco not responded to some of these countries when they offered assistance?
It is a heavy disaster for the people and the country in Morocco and in Libya, and we are all our hearts with them. And of course, many countries are offering their help. Then it is up to Morocco to choose who can come and start helping the country. From our side, of course, Egypt made its efforts in order to mobilize whatever our brothers in Morocco are in need of. And today there was contacts between the two authorities in Egypt and Morocco. Also, we have seen our president addressing our army leaders in order to mobilize all what we can do
Yes.
to help our brothers in Morocco, whether it is medicine, whether it is places where to host those who lost their houses, and any ways and means of help to this dear country to us. Mind you that also the problem in Libya is very dear and very serious.
Yes.
And we have a big Egyptian community in both countries. In Libya, we have almost 2 million Egyptians in Libya. In Morocco, tens of thousands of Egyptians are living among their brothers in Morocco. So it is very dear to us what is happening in Morocco. And let us hope that we can do whatever
Yes.
it takes in order to help our brothers in the two countries.
Sir, as you said, Egypt, along with other Arab countries such as the UAE and Qatar, have offered assistance to Morocco. What other action can be taken by Arab nations in general, and what can the Arab League offer when it comes to what's happening in Morocco and Libya?
I think the neighbor countries to Morocco can host some of those who lost their houses. I'm talking here about Algeria, which is offering also its great help. Tunisia also can help in this field. In Egypt, we have plenty of Libyan, we have plenty of Moroccans among us, and I think Egypt, as a country who is hosting nowadays more than 9 million inhabitants coming from different Arab countries, I think that we are able to host more and more Moroccan. Also, they need our help, the direct help, to help them to uncover the ceilings which fall on top of the people there, and medicine and many things are need of. I cannot say all the details of this concern.
Yes.
And let us hope that we can help Moroccans to be in a better situation
Yes.
very soon.
Sir, after Morocco passes the emergency situation and everything is settled down when it comes to search and rescue operations happening there, how can Morocco start to rebuild after this disaster? Will we see some sort of donor conference created for Morocco or Libya for that matter as well?
It is a very long process, and of course we have on the international level and even the regional level of the Arab world, we have experts to face this. Don't forget that we have a similarly less serious earthquake in Egypt in the 90s, and we had to face it. And now the Moroccan, we shall encourage them, and the Libyan, in order to bring back those thousands who lost their normal life and their houses, in order to gain again their houses and to live normally under the ceiling of their country. It is not easy at all, but with the help of the international community and all the friendly countries and the brother countries of Morocco, let us hope that we can help them in order to overcome this problem.
Yes, here's to hoping that the Moroccans and Libyans are able to recover from these terrible natural disasters. Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the episode. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on Saturday addressed the opening session of the G20 summit in New Delhi in India. In his speech before the opening session of the 18th Head of State and Government Summit of the G20 in New Delhi, the President called for a comprehensive approach to formulate future agreements and reinforcing the role of international institutions in effective response to crisis and challenges. President el-Sisi stressed that achieving the common goals amid the current challenges requires a comprehensive outlook to form the future arrangements based on the United Nations international law, in addition to maximizing the role of international institutions in responding to challenges and crises. President el-Sisi stressed the G20's role in tackling global financial system problems, improving the international funding institutions, and regulating sustainable solutions for financial crises facing developing nations. The President added that during Egypt's presidency of the NEPAD, the specific goal for continental economic integration were made. And while presiding over COP27, Egypt managed to make tangible balances of the international climate agenda through green economic transition. In addition, the head of state has said, in light of facing the global food crisis, Egypt has recently announced to host an international center for grain storage and trade. The president wrapped his word welcoming the African Union joining the G20, looking forward to the summit's conclusion with a promising outcome to achieve the aspirations of nations. Still on the G20, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was received by the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the venue in G20, where the leaders held talks on different files. The President also met with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, Comoros President and current President of the AU, Assoumani Azili, and the Director General of the WHO, Tedros Adhanom. President el-Sisi also met with the Chinese Prime Minister Li Qiang and Brazilian President Lula da Silva. Presidential spokesperson Councillor Ahmed Fahmy said the meetings tackled a number of key regional and international issues of common concern, as well as ways of boosting joint cooperation at all fronts. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi held a meeting with the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, where the head of state confirmed that the EU is a key partner with Egypt in various development sectors. The two sides stressed the importance of continued joint coordination and enhancing mutual dialogue, touching upon the Russian-Ukraine crisis and the political repercussions worldwide. Moreover, the President met with the head of the European Council, Charles Michel, where they confirmed the strength of relations between Egypt and the EU and its member states. Both sides also expressed relief concerning the expanded cooperation in political and economic fields, especially within the framework of priority documents from the Egyptian-European Partnership for the coming years until 2027. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi participated in the European-African mini-summit, which was held on the sidelines of the G20 summit and brought together leaders and representatives of Germany, Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, France, South Africa, Nigeria, and the Comoros, as well as the European Union, the World Bank, the IMF. Presidential spokesperson Councillor Ahmed Fahmy said the summit witnessed the discussion of developments in a number of files of common concerns, especially the permanent membership of the AU in the G20. In this regard, President el-Sisi welcomed the steps, stressing that it goes in the right direction to provide opportunity to place the continent's priorities on the international agenda. The mini-summit also tackled in-depth talks on the current international situation and its negative impacts on the issues of food crises and energy security. President el-Sisi indicated that containing the challenges of the growing food crisis requires developing a joint vision of to strengthen the governance of the global food security system. And joining us over the phone to tell us more about this is Dr. Mohammed Rushdi, an economic and financial expert. Good evening to you, sir.
Hello, good evening for you and our audience.
President el-Sisi gave a speech during the opening session of the G20, stating the world needs some sort of comprehensive solution to counter the effects of economic woes in general, food security, and a number of other things. What, in your opinion, is the most important point stressed during this speech?
First of all, I would like to highlight that this is one of the most crucial and, let me quote it, one of the hot topics nowadays, And I would like to take you and our audience just briefly about the borrowing of from foreign creditors exposure. Actually, this is one of the most important and crucial things, which is I would like to highlight mainly the developing countries. Actually, developing countries' total public debt, as far as I recall, increased from 35% of GDP in 2010, as far as I recall, to 60% in 2021. Similarly, external public debt, the part of government's debt owed to foreign creditors, increased from 19% of GDP to 29% of GDP in 2021. Actually, this is one of the most important points, and mainly to turn back to our point during President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's speech. Actually, he stressed that there is need for multilateral cooperation before the debt crisis spiraled out of the control. There is an urgent need to address the debt problem of developing countries, which has taken on dangerous dimensions as a result of high burdens of debt services, not only in low-income countries, but also in middle-income countries. One of the most important things, which is the IMF annual report in 2022, about 60% of low-income developing countries are already at high risk of debt distress.
Yes.
Actually, Egyptian Minister Dr. Maid, he highlighted that, said the country has paid, as far as I recall, $52 billion of its foreign liabilities within past 2 fiscal years. And this is one of the most important things which give positive signals to the globe that Egypt is paying the debt cost or the interest, and we have the ability to pay all the installments and the debt cost debt cost, the interest rate mainly, the interest. This is one of the most important things. Egypt also extended the burden.
Yes, but sir, the focus of the speech itself, the focus of the speech itself was mainly on developing nations and the idea that the developed nations should bear the brunt of what's happening. And the president specifically spoke about climate change and its effects on the African continent. Why is it important to highlight this issue, especially that they're talking about having some sort of compensation for the African countries or the African continent in general?
Actually, our commitment to sustainable development agenda and the goals of the Paris Agreement on climate change requires us to ensure the availability of the necessary financing and improve the international financing system. That perhaps multilateral development banks, this is one of the most important things. And as far as I recall, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi proposed that multilateral development banks, MDBs, increase their lending capacity by providing conventional financing. They must also prevent the climate finance from overlapping with development finance. Actually, in Egypt's capacity as COP27, President Sisi called on developed countries to fulfill their obligation to fund climate action in developing countries and technology, which is one of the most important things.
Yes, sir. Why is it significant that the African Union now has become part of G20? Why is this important? Like you were saying, it's important to not just focus on dealing with climate, but also with development. Having a representation for the AU in the G20, how can this affect the continent when it comes to the economy?
Actually, this is one of the most important things, and it will affect a lot of things. The economy is the most important thing. As you know, and our audience nowadays, we can say the only constant actually, which is the change. The only constant in the life is a change, and we have a dynamic environment. And to invest in sustainable goals or sustainable development, one of it is the technology, which emphasizes the potential to increase productivity and generate new jobs for growth and investments. However, the technological gap between countries must be bridged in order to avoid creating inequality, and this is also tackled the growing concerns about the impact of automation and AI, which is the artificial intelligence, on the future of employment. Actually, this could have a negative social and economic impact on developing countries that rely on labor-intensive industries, which is one of the most important things. And if we can see the positive thing nowadays, we can have a solid plan to go for the new era, which is the digitalization. And this is one of the most important things. And nowadays, all countries are focusing to change their GDP structure, as you know, and our audience. There are three main factors in GDP structures: the industrial part, the agriculture part, and the service part. And the service part, which has the highest added value.
Okay, sir, unfortunately, we're sort of running out of time for this segment, so I have to cut you off there. But Dr. Mohamed Rushdi, an economic and financial expert, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the episode. Biden said he met with Chinese President Xi Jinping's number 2 Chinese Premier Li Keqiang at the annual G20 summit in New Delhi. The talks were the highest level between two powers in nearly 10 months since Biden and Xi spoke at last year's G20 in Indonesia. Here's the story.
U.S. President Joe Biden and China's number 2 Keqiang met at the G20. The two leaders were not expected to hold talks at the G20, but unscripted encounters at summits are common. The White House said Biden had met with a Chinese leader at the summit. Two superpowers have been trying to thaw frosty relations this year after a spat over a suspected Chinese spy balloon that flew over U.S. territory, while fears of an economic slowdown have gripped Beijing. Speaking at a press conference in Vietnam, Biden touted the U.S. economy as the strongest globally. He told reporters that China's growth was slowing due to a weak global economy, as well as Chinese policies, but did not specify which ones. Biden called China's economic situation a crisis, citing issues in the real estate sector and high youth unemployment. The Democratic president is headed into a 2024 re-election campaign where his own handling of the economy and inflation has become of concern. The U.S. economy grew at 2.1% annualized rate last quarter. Central bankers have sharply raised interest rates to bring inflation back down to target levels. Trade data show China's exports and imports both narrowing their decline, joining other indicators showing a possibility of stabilization in the economic downturn as policymakers seek to spur demand and fend off deflation. Li has said China should achieve its 2023 growth target of around 5%. However, some analysts think a worsening property slump, weak consumer spending and tumbling credit growth could mean lower growth. Biden is trying to keep communications open with China to lower the temperature and international frictions, including over Taiwan, self-ruled island claimed by China. He described the U.S. as a Pacific power with no intention of withdrawing from the region. He also said recent moves by Chinese officials to curb the use of U.S.-designed phones by state employees amounted to trying to change some of the rules of the game on trade.
And joining us over the phone to tell us more about this meeting is Dr. Sharif Hamid, a professor of international relations. Good evening to you, sir. Sir, can you hear me? Dr. Sharif, can you hear me? Sir? Yeah, it seems that there's an issue with the phone there, but we're going to move on with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un arriving in Russia on Tuesday for what the Kremlin said would be a comprehensive discussion with President Vladimir Putin amid warnings from Washington they should not trade weapons. Kim left Pyongyang for Russia on Sunday on his private train, the North State media reported on Tuesday, accompanied by top arms industry and military officials. A Russian source with knowledge of the trip told Reuters Kim arrived on Tuesday morning, leaving his train to meet local officials in Khasan, the main rail gateway to Russia's Far East, before continuing on. Kim's arrival was also reported on Tuesday by Russian state television, which showed a train purportedly carrying the North Korean leader with its signature olive green paint scheme crossing a bridge. Kim does not travel abroad frequently, making just 7 trips away from his country and twice stepping across the inter-Korean border in his 12 years in power. 4 of those trips were in the North's main political ally, China. Discussions could also include humanitarian aid to North Korea and the UN Security Council resolutions imposed against Pyongyang. U.S. officials who first said the visit was imminent said arms talks between Russia and North Korea were actively advancing, and Kim and Putin were likely to discuss providing Russia with weapons for the war in Ukraine. Australia's Weather Bureau said on Tuesday that El Niño indicators had strengthened and that the weather event would likely develop between September and November, bringing hotter, drier conditions to Australia. El Niño can provoke extreme weather phenomena from wildfires to tropical cyclones and prolonged droughts. The World Meteorological Organization said in July the weather pattern had emerged in tropical Pacific for the first time in 7 years, but the Australian Bureau for Meteorology has not yet matched the call. The Bureau said sea surface temperatures in the tropical Pacific had risen further, and the developments now exceed El Niño's threshold. It noted El Niño could last for an extended period and typically leads to reduced spring rainfall in eastern Australia. Lower rainfall is a threat to Australian crops and dry weather, causing the government this month to downgrade its forecast for winter wheat production. The Weather Bureau also said positive Indian dipole, the Indian Ocean equivalent of Pacific Ocean, had developed what would likely remain the Southern Hemisphere spring. Welcome back, and moving on to the world of business and finance. The yen slipped on Tuesday after its biggest daily rise since mid-July, the day before, as comments from Japan's top central bankers on a possible end to its negative interest rate policy reverberated throughout markets. The dollar, meanwhile, regained lost ground after clocking its biggest daily fall since July 13th, while the pound slipped after mixed labor market data. Japanese currency was last at 0.1% lower at 146.71 to the dollar after scaling a one-week top of 145.91 in the previous session. Elsewhere, the U.S. dollar reversed some of its losses from the previous session, with the euro falling 0.3% after touching a one-week high before Thursday's European Central Bank policy announcement. The pound fell after a mixed labor market report that showed more signs of cooling in the 3 months to July, but wage growth continued to rise quickly and above the rate of inflation. Sterling was last down 0.2% against the dollar at $1.2479 and little changed against the euro. Russian President Vladimir Putin said his comments on Tuesday about high domestic fuel prices that the government had failed to react in time to rising prices of oil in global markets. World demand for oil, gas and coal is forecast for the first time to peak this decade.
OPEC on Tuesday stuck to its forecasts for robust growth in global oil demand in 2023 and 2024, citing signs that major economies are faring better than expected, despite headwinds such as high interest rates and elevated inflation. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries said that the world oil demand will rise by 2.25 million barrels per day in 2024, compared with growth of 2.44 million barrels per day in 2023, both forecasts were unchanged from last month. A lifting of pandemic lockdowns in China had helped oil demand rise in 2023. OPEC has maintained a relatively upbeat view on 2024, seeing stronger demand growth than other forecasters such as the International Energy Agency. Oil demand collapsed in 2020, prompting some predictions of an early peak in world oil use. OPEC has been consistently saying it would recover and said in the report demand would average 102.1 million barrels per day in 2023, above the pre-pandemic rate during 2019. OPEC and its allies known as OPEC Plus began limiting supplies in 2022 to bolster the market. Global benchmark Brent crude breached $90 a barrel last week for the first time in 2023 after Saudi Arabia and Russia extended voluntary cuts until the end of the year. Brent crude prices rose as high as $91.82 a barrel after the report was released, hitting a fresh 2023 high.
The Moroccan government wants to proceed with the International Monetary Fund World Bank annual meeting scheduled for October in Marrakesh despite Friday's devastating earthquake. And the IMF said that they declined to comment Morocco's position on the meeting, referring to a joint weekend statement with India, France and the EU, as well as the African Union, expressed condolences for the loss of life and damage, and spoke of a willingness to support Morocco in the best way possible, including addressing urgent short-term financial needs. Both institutions said they had immediate focus on the initial response to the disaster. The death toll for the 6.8 magnitude quake that struck in the High Atlas Mountains, southwest of Marrakesh, claimed more than 2,900 lives. The collapse of the traditional mud brick houses into the earth rubble in the hardest hit areas made the search for survivors particularly difficult. Britain's labour market showed more signs of cooling in the 3 months through July, even as data showing another month of strong pay growth left the Bank of England on track for a further interest rate hike next month. The unemployment rate rose, the number of people working fell sharply, and vacancies dipped below 1 million for the first time in 2 years, according to ONUS. It was another record month for pay growth, however, which was most investors think will prompt the BOE to raise interest rates on September 22nd to 5.5% from 5.25%. The unemployment rate rose to 4.3% in the 3 months to July, and the jobless rate is already higher than the 4.1 forecast by the BOE. Employment dropped by a greater than expected 207,000 in the 3 months to July, the biggest such fall since the 3 months to October 2020. In the arts, the Hollywood strike may have robbed Venice of its usual bevy of stars, but the world's oldest film festival, which concludes Saturday, proved it is still a launchpad for major awards contenders and political statements. There have been very strong contenders at the 80th edition of the festival in the Lido Island. The year's Golden Lion is being decided by jury led by director Damien Chazelle and include Jane Campion, Laura Potarius, who won last year for Big Pharma documentary All the Beauty and Bloodshed. The last of 23 films in competition was Memory, which screened on Friday and could be a last-minute contender for awards with its moving and morally complex tale of a recovering alcoholic befriending a man with dementia. It stars Jessica Chastain and was one of the few Hollywood stars able to attend the festival, as the movie was given an exemption by striking unions because it was made outside the studios. Chastain backed the strike, saying actors had been silenced for too long on workplace abuse. Adam Driver was also able to come for independent film Ferrari from Michael Mann and was also backed by the strike. But director David Finch, who premiered his assassin movie The Killer, starring Michael Fassbender, has been closely associated with the studios, triggering controversy by saying he understood both sides. And in our final segment, sports, former Borussia Dortmund forward Anthony Modest joined Egypt and African champions Al Ahly just 1 year after he signed for the German club with high expectations for replacing Erling Haaland. Frenchman Modest joined Dortmund to fill in the Sebastian Haller, who was diagnosed with a malignant testicular tumour. Haller had only just joined the club to replace current Manchester City goal machine Haaland. Modest scored only twice in 19 Bundesliga games with Dortmund last season and was a gasp equaliser to complete a comeback with a snatch. Al Ahly contract with Modest will be for 1 year and may be extended for more according to the terms and conditions. Modest may debut as early as next Friday when Al Ahly will face Algerian USAM Alger in African Super Cup in Saudi Arabia. The Egyptian League will kick off 3 days later. Lionel Messi skipped Argentina's last practice session on the eve of the World Cup qualifying match in Bolivia. The 36-year-old striker left Argentina's match against Ecuador last week, complaining of fatigue, which could impact coach Lionel Scaloni's selection for Tuesday. And during Monday's training, Messi sat on a chair close to Scaloni and watched his teammates practice. He spoke to the coach as other players tried to adapt to the altitude and the quicker speed of the ball, which is a characteristic that makes it so hard for visitors to win in Bolivia. Scaloni gave no hints at the practice session on what will do if Messi doesn't play in the Hernando Salas Stadium. Brazil last week, American qualifying. Messi scored from the free kick to give Argentina a 1-0 win against Ecuador. Finally, in tennis, Novak Djokovic won his 24th Grand Slam title, will dominate men's tennis for years because younger players have yet to reach his level, according to Andy Murray. Djokovic's latest triumph in the U.S. Open saw him equal Margaret Court's record of major singles title. The 36-year-old Serbian, one of the big three with Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer, who dominated men's tennis for the past 2 decades, said he had no plans to retire. In July, 20-year-old Carlos Alcaraz ended Djokovic's Wimbledon reign after the Serbian, who had won 4 titles in a row at the All England club. However, Murray believes the wrong conclusions were drawn from the Spaniard's victory. World number 1 Djokovic will next travel to Valencia and join the Serbia team for the Davis Cup final group stage ties with South Korea, Spain and the Czech Republic. This brings us to the end of the sports news and this edition of Nile TV Newsroom Live. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more.